Okay, so hello and welcome. This is Shanaz Bano from Sachi Saheli, and today we are celebrating Menstrual Hygiene Day 2021. We know that 28 May is it is celebrated as Global Menstrual Hygiene Day every year by different organizations, nations, and individuals to highlight and support good and safe menstrual hygiene practices. So today we will be discussing sustainable menstruation because it is very, very important. We have approximately 355 million menstruating women and girls in India, and a single woman can use and discard more than 11,000 sanitary waste every year, and India alone can produce approximate 9,000 tons of menstrual waste everywhere. So it is very, very important to know about the sustainable alternatives that we have in the market. And we have invited a very special guest with us, Miss Kathy Walkling from Eco Femme, and rest of the story we will like to hear from Kathy. Hi,
Mhm.
Kathy.
Hi, Shanaz.
So, Kathy, would you please tell us a little about your journey with EcoFam and how you came to advocate these reusable cloth pads?
Sure. So I came from Australia to India about 24 years ago to settle in Oroville. And one of the first things that I sort of was confronted with when I reached my new home here was actually my own challenge to deal with sanitary waste. In Australia, where I'd come from, there were always bins kind of conveniently placed next to the toilet. And to be honest, it wasn't something that I'd even considered before reaching India. And I guess it was a combination of really visibly seeing general waste, let alone sanitary waste, kind of, everywhere. Like it was much more visible in India than it. Um, and in a way, given when I was presented with my own sort of waste disposal challenge to dig a hole to bury my sanitary waste, it really made me stop and think in a way that I hadn't. It's also difficult actually to dig that hole and to, go through this effort every month. So I started to kind of think about what were if there were other options. And bear in mind, this is kind of almost pre-internet time. So I was lucky enough to find a cloth pad in New Zealand actually when I was on holidays. And I really just instinctively was attracted. It was unpackaged, it was obviously homemade, but I kind of naturally understood that this simple cloth pad would actually address the problem that I was facing. So that was how my journey started. And when I started to use the cloth pad, I actually discovered a whole lot of surprising additional benefits, not just the fact that it sort of solved the waste issue because I could then wash and reuse the cloth pad, but it sort of got me thinking about how I was also going to save money and how I would also actually brought me into more direct contact with my menstruation. So that's kind of what got me excited about cloth pads. And about 10 years ago, actually 12 years ago, with my co-founder, we decided to actually give it a go to make it a social enterprise with this cloth pad idea, because we'd seen the sort of uptake of that product here in Oroville, where I live. And we just thought we'd try. It was obviously, it had a certain value and merit, and everyone I knew who'd started using cloth pads also thought they were really great products. So it was sort of like an opportunity that was sitting in front of us, and we thought we would try it out. And at that time, I was working with a social enterprise, also with an NGO that were working with rural women. So we saw the opportunity to combine the tailoring capacity that they had with this product, and offering it as an alternative product into the Indian marketplace.
Okay, Katie, I think our viewers and our team wants to know about the different kinds of reusable cloth pads that are available in the market, especially when we go for online shopping, we see different varieties. So
Yeah.
could you just tell us what are the types that are available and their pros and cons?
Sure. So cloth pad is a fairly generic term to really mean any menstrual absorbent made out of cloth. And there are very simple variations on that idea, such as what gunj do, which is taking a square piece of cloth and folding it around cloth offcuts. This is inexpensive, it's not stitched. The kind of product we make, I'll just show the listeners. I mean, this is essentially the cloth pad for anyone who hasn't seen. And what it is just multiple layers of, in our case, we use cotton. Some manufacturers use other materials like hemp or bamboo fiber, but the idea is it should be clean, natural, and absorbent material. And you've got these sort of functional elements of wings that can fasten around the panties. And this back layer here is leak proof. Just to sort of show you in a way, like there's no sort of big secrets here. This is the open pad. So, you know, this is a top layer. Inside, you've got multiple layers of, I hope you can see that, absorbent flannel. And then this back layer, which is leak proofing, is actually made leak proofing because of a lamination of polyurethane. So it's like melted onto a cotton fabric layer. And this is very thin, very discreet, very quiet. And this provides a leak proofing. So, you know, all these layers get stitched together. And this is the pad. And in our case, we have different sizes to kind of cater to different flows. So in fact, we just recently launched a very, very large pad, which we call Super Comfy, which is, it's about nearly, I think it's about 28, nearly 30 centimeters long and quite wide with double buttons. But they can go down to as small as something like a panty liner, which is more for everyday use. And just quickly sort of show, you know, so there's size variations, and obviously with the size variations, absorbency variations too. So it gives a user the flexibility of using perhaps on the first, excuse me, the first day or so of the period when maybe they're bleeding more heavily, they could opt for a heavier flow pad. And as the period becomes lighter, they can switch to a lighter flow pad. So that's the basic idea. It's very simple. It's a really low-tech product, I always say.
That's actually quite wonderful. And like you also said, Kathy, that that it is an opportunity for you that was sitting right there, and you took it after a while. So and that brings me to the question that in India especially, women were using menstruators were using cloth in general for a very long period of time. For instance, my nani, my mother, and all of
Yeah,
these people used cloth
yeah,
in general. And then we asked them, and there was a phase where we asked them to make the switch to a normal, regular plastic pad.
yeah,
And now
yeah.
we're again, advocating for cloth as an absorbent material. We're advocating for cloth pads. So I just, if you could help us understand this shift, why is it that we're encouraging cloth again when we discouraged it at one point, and how has this cloth changed over the years
Um,
that it become fit to use?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and it reflects also a kind of, you know, changing mindset, I would say. So when we started about 12 years ago, the idea of a cloth pad, like I just showed you, was really unknown. But the practice of cloth was the most common practice, actually, of dealing with menstruation. And we're not talking that long ago, like this was 12 years ago. There was an estimated 12% of Indian women were using disposables. So, in a very, very short space of time, something really changed. And what we started to see was really quite strong media and advertising efforts to really persuade the population to shift to disposables. And this was also reinforced, I would say, by government initiatives such as the program to give adolescent girls in government schools. You know, in hostels, for example, free access to sanitary napkins. The basic idea they had was that girls were dropping out of school. It was affecting their educational outcomes, and therefore we need to keep girls in school. And if we give them sanitary napkins, that would, you know, go a long way towards solving the problem. But unfortunately, the part of the equation that was being neglected was the aspect of disposal. And and the garbage. Nobody was talking about it. And it was as if there was this sort of optical illusion, like we give the pads and the problem will be solved. And I think meanwhile, what's happened over the last, 5, 10 years is that we've all gotten much more aware that while we might have attempted to solve one problem, which is giving girls and women, in this case, access to absorbent, clean and safe absorbents, we created another, which was the waste problem. So that was one thing that I think was really left out of the initial reflections when the whole push towards disposables happened. Um, I think too that there was at that time, cloth also had its limitations. I mean, I think I love cloth, obviously, and I think it is safe if it's clean. If we wash and dry at cloth properly, there's no problem with it. But I think the other reality is that as women have become more mobile and, they go to work and we're traveling and we have much more, especially in urban areas, we're not sort of at home as much. So there was really a genuine need for, I think, a functional menstrual products that would, not leak and not move around when we were moving around. So again, in the absence of something like a cloth pad and even menstrual cups, the sanitary napkin found its niche. But as the landscape has evolved over the last years, I think there's been just a real evolution in the nuanced thinking around what constitutes safe and healthy menstrual hygiene. And, we're now starting to include environment in that conversation. We're looking at the ingredients much more actively, thanks to the efforts of a lot of activists who are recognizing that one of the other problems with sanitary napkins is the amount of chemicals that are also there. So issues to do with rashes or allergic reaction were also starting to become more talked about. And I think we're also, it connects with a cultural development too, where menstruation is now, as you well know, we're talking about it much more than we used to talk about it 5, 10 years ago. Like it's starting to mainstream. And in the, when there's silence, when there's a culture of concealment, then, products that are, maybe causing irritations or polluting are not being pushed back against because we're shy to talk about it. But now there's much more public discourse, and as a result, there's, we're raising our voices around the sort of health and environmental consequences of disposable pads. So actually cloth pads and other reusable options are now starting to find legitimacy, largely I think pushed by social media and advocacy and activists efforts to really bring visibility to this topic.
Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah, I think so. Kathy, for a person who is using a cloth pad for the first time, how does somebody have to choose which cloth pad works for them? Like there are various sizes, materials, and variations.
Yeah. Good question. I think that sometimes there is also hesitancy. There's uncertainty about, will the product perform, which size, all of that. So I'll speak to that more generally, perhaps. That I'd first of all always suggest, unless you're really confident and you just know you're ready to switch and make, a full switch, I always suggest to people kind of just go slow, maybe get 1 or 2 pads. And I typically recommend either a day pad, which is a sort of regular size pad, or maybe a day pad plus. If you know you've got a really heavy flow, something like a night pad, which is also wider at the end, can also be tried. I also recommend starting with 1 or 2 and starting on a day when you're at home. So maybe not the first day of your period, maybe not a day where you've got a lot going on and, you're just not sure how this product's going to perform. Like give yourself a chance to put it through its paces when you're at home, when you're maybe near a bathroom. And I say that not because there's big risks with, leaking and accidents, but more just to give you that reassurance, because it is a behavior change. And I think you have to understand that a cloth pad, while it performs relatively comparable to a disposable pad, it doesn't, for example, have super absorbent polymers in it, which is the main absorbing material in a disposable pad. So, it brushes, for example. So yeah, I think start with, maybe 1 or 2 pads just to get the feeling for how it's absorbing, how much time it can be worn. We usually and also to kind of get familiar with the washing and drying routine as well, because that's obviously part of caring for a cloth pad.
Thank you so much.
Katie, in India, we have very many women who don't wear a panty. So they directly wear a salwar or sari something. So since it does not have any adhesive on the back, so is it still recommended for those women's?
Well, it's an interesting point you're raising because, it was one of the first things we were sort of told when we were starting this work is, oh, a lot of women don't wear underwear. And in fact, we started to really research in rural and tribal communities. And again, I think it's one of those things that has actually changed. I think, in fact, most women do really wear underwear these days, that there has been really a change, or they might only wear it while they're menstruating. But you're right, there is this traditional practice of wearing a nada or a string and folding cloth and as a sort of belted model. And we do have that option available. But to be really honest, we've had very little interest in that particular product. I think I guess there's just been a shift towards more readiness to wear underwear. Um, the other thing I could maybe mention, it's again just another variation, but I think it's important in the kind of again in India, one of the things we are often confronted with is the hesitation to dry the cloth pad in a place where someone can see it and it's maybe visible, and there is sometimes embarrassment around that. So for that reason, I'll just show another variant that we made, which we call a foldable cloth pad. And you can see that it still has wings and a leak-proof layer, but instead this is a model that can be folded. So the pad folds 2 times into, so it actually ends up having 8 layers, and then it's worn in the panties like this and buttoned around. So this was one of the design innovations that we came up with to try to make a cloth pad that was more functional and culturally appropriate for women who have this hesitation to dry in the sun. And again, because it's so thin, this is actually a double layer, but it's very thin still relative to the other pads, so it can dry really quickly. So again, if there's sun scarcity, it means that the pad can dry usually within 2-3 hours on a sunny day without needing to be outside and visible for so long.
Thank you.
what would you say is the most correct and effective way to use a cloth pad?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I couldn't hear that.
What is the most correct and the effective way to use a cloth pad? How do you use it? How do you
Rikita, you're not audible, Rikita. आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है.
am I audible now? Shreya, can you take that question?
Yeah. I'll just repeat Rikita ma'am's question. She says that what is the most correct and effective way to use a cloth pad?
So the first thing is that if you're using the pad for the first time, we recommend 1 or even 2 washings and dryings. That's similar to something like a towel as well. If we know with cotton that the more, once it's been sort of seasoned in a way through washing, opens up its sort of absorbing capacity. So this is the first thing that we recommend, 1 or 2 washes before it's actually put into use. And then, you place it in the panties. So the sort of absorbent layers, the flannel layers go against the body, the wings button underneath, and you just wear it for like a normal disposable pad for 4-6 hours. And obviously you'll probably go to the bathroom in between, so you wash yourself. You might find that the pad is also in the disposable pad. And this is also why it's important to make sure you do change it about every 6 hours, so there's no sort of extra buildup of moisture or any risk for bacteria. When it comes to washing and drying, it's really simple actually. You just take the cloth pad. In fact, if you're out and about, I'll just show you how one simple thing you can do. If you, let's say you're at work or school or whatever, you can first of all fold your soiled pad into a neat little package like this, and just button it on it, just button it around itself. So it just folds up like a really neat packet, and all the blood sort of stays inside. And we also have like little pouches, or any bag will do, where you can just sort of, keep the pad inside the pouch, and take it home for washing. And you can also keep your clean pad in here as well, so that you've got you can just to the bathroom. Nobody needs to know you're going for a pad change, and then you take it home for washing. So now the washing sequence, you open it up, and you just put it into a little vessel with cold water, not hot water. It could be lukewarm, but it shouldn't be hot or boiling water for the initial soak, because blood really needs cold water to come out. Otherwise, it can stain. And the cold water is quite magic. Most of the blood will be released at that point, and then you can actually wash it normally. So, I mean, for example, I do it in the shower. I just take a soap bar and rub it on the pad like this, and no brushing is needed, and then rinse it properly so all the soap and the blood, any residue blood, comes through, and then it's ready for drying. It can also go into a washing machine under 40 degrees. And yeah, it's just really quite simple. It just takes really 2-3 minutes. And like I said, the soaking is sort of the magic trick. And we do recommend sun drying to really give it, because we know this ultraviolet rays are really naturally sanitizing the pad as well. It doesn't need any special care. You can add a few drops of Dettol to the water. That can also be done if you'd like to do that. But generally, you should find, if you've washed your pad well and it's properly dried, it can last for, a good 75 washes or more, and it shouldn't build up with mold. And, make sure that your pad's really properly dried and doesn't smell when you put it away. And then it's good to go the next time.
Is it convenient for menstruators who have heavy bleeding on second and third day, and especially in the night when we sleep in different positions? So we always fear about, leakage and.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for sure it can be done. I mean, I know so many women, a lot of women who just use cloth pads, they manage. And that's why we have the now big, very big, super comfy, or the night pads. So we've got really, really large. Um, Again, one thing I also always say to people is that if you really kind of, it's like, take your time with the switch. You don't have to do it all in once, and like, it's not, doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. Like, if you start using cloth pad, you can always combine it with some disposables for some time, and you see what difference it makes. I mean, I just know that so many women start like that. They start with and they have a positive experience. They notice actually that it works, that they're not getting any more rashes. It feels kind of comfortable. It's doing what they want it to do, and gradually there'll be increased use of cloth pad after that. A full practice of only using cloth. Sometimes it's combined with menstrual cups, sometimes it's combined with disposable pads. Sometimes, menstruators will use a cloth pad 90% of the time, but when they're traveling, they'll go back to a disposable pad. So I think it's important not to be sort of too fundamental about it. Like, it's not like you're a bad person if you need to go back to a disposable at times, or you want to use a combination. I think any effort to use a cloth pad is great. It's good for your body, it's good for the earth, but do what works for you. Just know you've got choices, and try try them out and see if you can make some for it. And you'll be doing your body and the earth a favor. But I don't ever think that the environment's enough of a reason to just switch. I think it's really, really important, but I think the product should perform as well. We don't want to sort of make kind of crazy compensations for the earth if the product doesn't work. So I think really the point is, get used to how the product build up your use as time goes on.
So I think, I mean, am I audible? I'm not sure.
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that what you're suggesting is a phasing out process, and also listening to your body as you go,
Yeah.
and understanding how comfortable you are. And I think that should help a lot of us making that switch. who really want to. And another question that we had was that since this is cloth, and does it feel while you wear it, does it feel like you have that constant wet feeling, or does it feel dry? What does it feel like if you use that
Yeah,
pad?
I think actually usually it feels like underwear. You know, it really in a way is what it is. It's sort of cotton, and mostly if we're wearing, you know, we wear cotton underwear for the most part. And you know, even if you're washing with water, there might be a little bit of moisture. But I think, you know, there's a sort of feeling you kind of don't notice it after some time. It's not like it's a particularly strange, unusual experience. It really is like wearing underwear. I mean, the pads are not specially bulky. They're quite thin. I don't know if you can kind of get a felt sense of that, but it's not like you really, I think, feel much difference than you do with the underwear that you're normally wearing.
Okay.
Is it safe to use a cloth pad for those who have sensitive skins? Because the cloth pad absorbs the blood, but still it touches our body. So is it safe?
Yeah. I would say it's personally, I'm actually more and more convinced it's even more safe than the disposable pads. And my reason for saying this is really based on growing evidence. So we do a lot, especially in rural areas where we can follow up with menstruators and hear about their experience over time. And what I'm seeing increasingly is feedback indicating that they're getting a resolution to symptoms like rashes and allergic reactions. So people who are sensitive are actually often reacting adversely to the chemicals in the especially commercially branded disposable napkins. And these symptoms are clearing up when they use cloth because it's natural, because it's breathable, because it doesn't it. So again, I really encourage people who are struggling because of sensitivity to actually try a cloth pad and make your experience. There's nothing in the pad that can harm, like nothing, you know. And if you're fine with underwear, you should be fine with a cloth pad.
Well, that's right, ma'am. I also had a question. I was thinking that, what if somebody uses a cloth pad and changes it in a public place? As you said, that, we can just, keep it back in the pouch and go back home, clean it. What if it takes a little bit longer and the person is traveling for maybe, 1 or 2 days and goes back home and cleans it? Does it change the properties? I mean, is it going to be bacteria free even then?
Again, I can't say we've done any scientific research on that, but I have seen that after about 24 hours, if you've got a pad that's stored and it hasn't been washed, you will start to smell it. And again, I think probably with, a good thorough wash with some Dettol, that is probably okay. But I think generally you shouldn't sort of hold on to the pads for more than 24 hours before washing them. And again, I think this is where common sense needs to sense rather than radical, or you have to only use a cloth pad. I think it's like, if you know you're in a situation where it's not going to be feasible to do the appropriate care, you don't have access to water, whatever, then make the exception at that time. It's your health and safety is obviously the first priority, and I think one has to be pragmatic about that.
That's right. Thank you.
Can I jump in with a question, girls?
Yes.
Hi, Kathy.
Rita?
I last time I went to Orwell, I picked up two pads. One pad which has flannel layers. I hadn't taken them out since, I don't know, a year and a half. I think I must have used them right in the or at the time, and then I never used them after that. One I picked up were with flannel layers, But there's another pad that I picked up which had cotton cloth layers. It is not flannel layers, but it is cotton cloth layers which is tied.
Like this?
No,
No?
that's
No?
not Eco Femme that I've picked.
Oh, I
Yours
see.
are
Oh, I see.
layers, right?
Oh,
But
okay.
there's another pad which has cotton cloth layers.
Yeah.
My experience with both of them has been because I'm chumming and I tried putting on last night itself, since we've been having these discussions. I
Yeah.
tried using both the pads. I
Yeah.
noticed that if I'm wearing a cotton cloth pad, my skin feels better, but it is more uncomfortable as compared to the flannel layer pads that I use from, or the ones that I picked up from Auroville.
Mm.
How do you think the difference comes in? How does it matter when I'm out in the sun or I'm in humid areas or the times when there's no AC working? Because cotton cloth, wo sukar jata hai. It starts getting wrinkles because there are 8-9 layers of the cloth which is folded and put up on the pad to act like an absorbent.
Okay.
Similarly, with the flannel pad, which has layers in it, and I haven't washed it more than 5 or 7 times. I still can feel some layers come together at some places.
Mm.
How do I deal with that when I'm out in the sun or when I'm sweating a lot? Because then it actually becomes very itchy.
Mm. Well, first of all, I just want to make a clarification that actually flannel is cotton. It's just cotton that has been brushed and opens up the fibers, but it is still cotton. Yeah.
But if you okay, have you seen the other pads that I'm talking about? What was the other company? Stone and Soup, I think.
Oh,
Have you
okay.
seen their
Yeah.
pads? Their pads
No.
are more like muslin.
Okay. Okay.
Their pads are more like
Yeah.
muslin, so that's why they're
Yeah.
softer.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
they're probably thinner in their this thing. So there are 9 layers
Yeah.
all together
Yeah.
wrapped up in
Yeah.
a holder to hold it as a pad.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel my personal experiences they come together after getting
Mm.
wet. They come together
Mm.
and it becomes
Yeah.
difficult. But with flannel, it wasn't that case. But after washing, it does come together somewhere in between the layers.
Mm. Yeah, I do say, I mean, it's probably difficult for me to comment extensively on your question, but I notice, like for our pad too, that one with mine, I often find that after I've dried them in the sun, they can get also a little bit stiff and the layers can kind of feel a little bit stuck together. And sometimes what I do is I just physically just open it up,
Put it out.
I just kind of ruffle the pad up a little bit and it just kind of makes it more sort of alive again, I would say. The sun can be sometimes quite hard and drying and make the layers kind of a little bit come
Do you
together.
think hanging and drying is a good option, or do you think laying
Yeah.
and drying is a better option?
I think both work, but I do find this physically handling the pad after it's been in the sun, whether it's drying. I mean, drying is maybe easier to get, the air
Both
around the
sides.
back and the front. But if as long as it's properly dried, it shouldn't be a problem. But maybe you try next time just that, puffing it up a little bit and see if that helps.
I'll try that definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
Just a quick follow-up question on the drying part, Kathy. So, what if there's not ample sunlight or no sunlight, let's say, to dry
Yeah.
your pad? Would you recommend that we still use it, or is it okay to use it even despite that there is no sunlight to dry it out?
Yeah, I think sunlight is ideal. What I've sometimes done when it's been raining a lot and I haven't had much sun, and I know many women do this. I mean, one is to potentially maybe use the foldable model at that stage when, so you actually get whatever benefit of little sun if the sun's there, but it's maybe, weak or scarce. Or alternatively, if you're really finding that you're not getting sun for a few days and yet you have to dry your pad, you can try and dry it, inside under a fan or in whatever way you can. And then whenever it's possible, get it out into the sun for that, 1 or 2 hours of just, extra drying from and UV light. That can be done later, but I think the main thing is you don't want to store damp pads because that's the kind of way in which fungus can breed.
Okay, great.
And maybe that's the time when you just have to say, it's not working for me right now. I'll use, a menstrual cup or I'll use disposable pad and wait till the sun comes out. So again, common sense. Yeah.
And I think so. One more question about this is that how long? For how long? You said that the cloth pad it lasts up to 75 washes. So when do I know? If just by looking at my pad, when do I know that I need to retire it and I need to use a new set of cloth pads? Is there any signs that I should be looking out for?
Yeah, I think it's again a little bit like your underwear. You sort of know, when it's sort of maybe it becomes, really you just don't like how it looks anymore, it's starting to look a bit rough, or it's maybe, really not, you feel it's just not performing as well. Maybe the absorbency is just really breaking down. It's not doing the same efficiency. I think that's really variable. Like, I personally am someone who probably, use my cloth pad even longer than it needs, it's 75 washes. The 75, by the way, is really based on the lifespan of the PUL, leak-proof layer. So that's how we come up with that number. So it might be that the leak proofing becomes more, you start to notice it actually leaks, in which case you maybe decide that's the time. So I don't think there's any hard rule about it. It's a feeling. It's just like I think, just like with your underwear, it's like, it's enough. But I think if you do notice that the pad is smelling and, it looks maybe a little bit like it's getting maybe black marks, which could indicate fungus, that's probably a good time to also retire your pad as well.
Kathy, you told us about, when we have to discard the cloth pad, but what if we are telling somebody how to, what would be the best way to dispose of a cloth pad? Could you please?
Yeah, sure. So I think that everything is biodegradable in terms of the inside layers and the top layer. So this can easily be buried. And the back layer is the only thing that has anything that's not pure kind of biodegradable material because of the leak proofing. So you can remove this layer, just cut it out, and this would then go into a mixed waste for landfill. And the button as well can be, it's metal. So it's a little bit of a fiddle. You can kind of cut it open, but fortunately, you probably only have to do it once every couple of years. So that's easy enough if you're like, it's sort of like organic waste, actually, these layers.
I also have a follow-up question. We are seeing that you are showing us a lot of colorful, beautiful pads, and we most of the time the vegetable dyes are also used, and it's much more safer to when it comes in contact with the skin. So if we are encouraging somebody to make a cloth pad at home, are all the kinds of dyes that are used in the cloths safer to use?
Yeah. Okay. Good question. I think that, I mean, the thing with vegetable, what we use actually now is our azo-free dyes. So these are actually recognized under the organic certification as safe and non-reactive with skin. I think what's important though, just so if you're doing cloth pad making workshops and you're working with different materials, obviously you probably want to use materials that are clearly not where the color is fast leaching out onto the skin. And I don't exactly know sort of how you go about it, but I think the problem we found with vegetable dyes is just durability of the color. They just don't last, they tend to sort of run and, and fade very, very quickly. So for what we were doing, it's not really viable. The other thing is that using natural colors, like we have also a whole range where we just use unbleached, undyed cotton as well, like what I'm showing you. And this is obviously even, I mean, the other colored ones are actually perfectly inert and safe as well. But it's also can be interesting to just actually see the color of the blood that's coming out and to use a natural colored pad. Some people are worried more about sort of staining with the natural colored one. So it's just a preference thing. But I think the main thing is you want to use fabric where the color isn't running. That's the main thing to make sure you're not kind of having any.
Thank you.
That's something. Can I put in a question?
Yes, yes.
Am I audible?
Yes.
I have a 14-year-old daughter, Kathy, and I'm pretty keen on taking her away from the regular disposables that we are using. What are your suggestions for me to start as a mother, for a 14-year to be inclined towards using these, making it easy for her? Because we know washing and everything is not a very keen step every teen wants to take. So what are your suggestions to make it convenient and easy for the kids to start using it step by step?
It's a good question. I mean, I personally think a frank and open conversation with her about why you think it's worth considering the alternatives in the first place, just speaking from your heart and saying, maybe from your own experience as well. Like, I'm not sure, you've mentioned that you've also, I think, tried maybe cloth pads yourself. Anyway, I think that, these are conversations that we all need to start having with the people in our lives that we care about, because obviously the reason that we're even talking about something like a cloth pad in the first place is that we know we're facing a collective problem with waste. And also, I do think it's really interesting, this point around health and around the chemicals in disposable pads. So again, if you've had any experience about rashes or allergic reaction, I mean, I would just tell her, quite frankly, maybe you haven't, maybe those products are working well for you. But I think what is fair to say is that we know the vagina is highly sensitive. I mean, it's a very absorbent part of the body. And any chemicals that we're putting close to our vaginal area aren't doing us any favors, I believe. So I think that, just really presenting some of your concerns, the concerns maybe around health, around the impact of the environment, get her thinking about what happens. Maybe, I assume you're in an urban area where you can throw your disposable pads and somebody comes and picks them up. But there's an interesting conversation as well. What happens after, it's left, she's wrapped it up and put it in the bin, but then what happens, somebody's actually handling her pad, how does that feel? So I think we do need to start being kind of a bit courageous and willing to have these conversations around personal responsibility as well, for the for our waste, and for, and even in a certain way, what you're touching on, I think, in your question, is the hesitation that we also have maybe to touch menstrual blood, and this idea that it's maybe a bit disgusting and I don't really want to do that. And, if I'm right, that that's part of the question, I think that's a super interesting conversation as well. Like, well, where does that idea come from? That was something that really confronted me when I first switched to cloth pads. It was like, oh, I was really, remember that feeling of like, am I going to go ahead and do this, But it was also such an interesting doorway into something in my own thinking and conditioning. And actually, it made me realize that I just bought this story that was fed to me through mainstream narratives and media, that there's something disgusting and dirty about menstruation and menstrual blood. And I think this is a super exciting conversation to have, really, to sort of question that whole internalized disgust around menstruation. And presumably, as a liberal, open-minded mother who's working on the topic of menstruation, I mean, I bet you could do some fabulous modeling of a different kind of, openness around that, and, just encourage her to try it. And, and maybe, I think the other thing is not to be too adamant as well, because we all know, I remember myself as a teenager, I mean, anything that I was told to do, I would completely do the opposite. Like, we don't like to be sort of told. So I think really just with an open heart, with, with a vulnerability, and really expressing your heartfelt reasons of why you'd like her to give it a go and to try it, but also, I think, not forcing, let her make her experience and just see what support she'd need to feel comfortable with that. Maybe she'd be willing to try with one, but I hope
that was pretty. I think that is a very important and a necessary conversation that we should be having with her. But another thing that I wanted to check, how much soaking helps? You told us earlier to soak it down. Do you think soaking, I'm not talking in terms of the pad down, I just as a human experience. Do you think soaking really makes it less dirty to wash it, and I can soak it for an hour and so on?
Yeah, no, it's really quite something, if you soak it before washing, just literally, you just drop it in the bucket, wiggle it a bit, even put it down so that the blood can come down. And almost always what I see is that actually the blood just literally settles at the bottom of that vessel. You can shake it up pretty fast, but essentially you really see the blood will just come out. And I can only say, give it a go and see for yourself. But it really makes it easier. It's a very important step, I think.
Yours has been an very encouraging conversation. I think I'm definitely going for it.
Yeah. And I think the part where you also mentioned about, that doorway into entering that place where you're actually dealing with your own blood. I think
Mm,
just wanted to add a small point here that
mm.
when I tried cloth pads also, I think when I washed it, honestly, if you ask me, I think it was honestly a very intimate experience. When I had
Yes,
that pad in my hand and I was washing off my own blood, I kind of felt a new connection with myself. It
yes,
it almost felt as if I've got intimate with myself, and
yes.
it kind of felt nice, honestly. Like
Mm,
it didn't feel dirty. It almost felt like, wow, I'm actually taking care of myself in this
yeah,
way. Intimate,
yeah.
honestly. I felt good. It did feel good.
Yeah, I love that you brought that piece, Rikita. I mean, I often say it because that was very much my experience as well. But I'm also aware that, like, sometimes people look at you a little bit skeptically, like, really? You know? But it's true, you know, for a lot of us, I think it's really, really true. You know, it's the first time that we've really had an intimate encounter with our menstrual blood. And, you know, and if you can just sort of step out of the way of the judging mind enough to just like, well, what is it actually? And I think it's a real gateway actually to really study to cultivate a very different relationship with menstruation. So I'm delighted that you shared that story and that you had that experience. Thanks.
Yes. I think adding on to just this conversation, I was going to ask you this towards the end of it, but since we're in the flow of this, just want to ask you, just want to, if you could, there are several benefits of using a cloth pad. We've been discussing
Mm,
all. So if
yeah,
you could tell us, all those women or all those menstruators who are on at the edge of making a switch, if you
yeah.
could give encouraging words, there are many benefits. If you could elaborate on that and just maybe that one bit of you saying,
Really, I
yeah,
think it's I think it's everything, to be honest. I think, you know, the health for sure, like, you know, the freedom from, you know, using products without chemicals, really something natural that's breathable. Health is definitely an advantage. Economic for sure, you definitely save money on reusing a product over time. Then I think it's about, I'd say, after if you buy a kit of cloth pads that will last you about 5 years, mm, probably after a year and a half, you're already saving money, like compared to what you would spend on disposables. So, you know, there's a huge cost benefit. Um, environment, of course. I mean, we know that a disposable pad sits around in the environment for about, you know, 500 to 800 years. So if you wash and reuse a cloth pad, you know, you're making, I think this is massive. Like really, when I thought about that and just kind of figured, and then you were speaking about that in the beginning of the Korshanas, that this just understanding what a personal impact, what a change that when we make the shift to a reusable, like how much we're reducing our garbage footprint is massive. It was shocking. I actually literally cannot think of any other behavior change that would reduce my waste load on Earth more than switching to reusables. And I would say finally, the more subtle but beautiful aspect that you spoke about, Rikita, is the growing intimacy with menstruation, you know, making friends with it. It's like, you know, we've got this experience whether we want it or not. So, you know, we can either be sort of like, you know, tune it out and be a bit disgusted by it, or we can just be curious about it and kind of come into connection. And I mean, I could talk for hours about that too. It's sort of like, I do really think that there's some great gifts around menstruation, but we've got to begin by being willing to sort of engage with it, at least, let you know. And I think these are steps towards, you know, maybe making friends with it, and if you're lucky you might even end up kind of really looking forward to your period at some point in time. That may be down the track, may never come, but you know, I think there's a journey there that's really interesting. So you know, I think there's pitfall could be perceived is the feeling that, oh, I have to wash and handle my blood, and that's a bit disgusting. I think it's really perceptual. The idea of the inconvenience. Again, I think convenience is something we really need to, you know, contemplate deeply. Like, what does it mean? It might be convenient for me to sort of pack it up and throw it away, but is that convenient for the next person down the train who has to deal with my waste? You know, thing in that too. So yeah, I quite frankly think there's only benefits of using something like a cloth pad, or, you know, I'd even add menstrual cups too. I think any reusable product is achieving the same benefits.
Well, we totally agree with you, ma'am. On that note, I also feel that, the idea of cloth pads is, it reaches to a diverse group of people. And if we talk about people with special needs, specifically for menstruators who are wheelchair bound, for that, in that case, because they suffer from a lot of rashes and it's always wet there. So I think cloth pads is also one of the, better feasible options for them, because they have to wear it for a very longer time. What would you say on that? I mean, is there any specific product that you can, suggest to people with special needs?
Mm. Look, my previous life before coming to Oroville and doing Eco Femme was I was an occupational therapist. So I worked a lot with people with special needs. And I think what I would really say is that every situation is unique. And I always say there is no one size fits all, even when it comes to menstrual products. Like I would never say, for example, only use cloth pads. This is a solution, everything else is garbage. Like I really think we really have to, be very, take each situation on its own merits and do the practical things. So, and even with this, I think it's still an area where we're still learning a lot. We're still kind of experimenting and trying things out. And I think the main thing is to not be afraid to make experiments and try. It might be maybe cloth pad seems the most logical. I think period panties are another newcomer onto the menstrual product landscape. Very interesting as well. Depends always, of course, on what the disability is. If it's to do with if it's visual, if it's to do with the hands, if it's pressure and lack of sensation, all different. So I think we just have to take it on as individual basis. And just again, I just think, and I'm sure you all agree with this too, it's like 50% of it is just the conversation, the dialogue, like getting in there, being curious, having open conversations, not going in assuming that you've got the right solution and here it is and you should use. It's like really, it's a relationship with your body, it's a relationship with the products and we're free to choose today. I think that's a luxury of the time that we're in, is that it's not just you have to use this one thing and it's either the old cloth or the disposable. Like today we've got choices. Let's exercise our freedom of choice, use it wisely, and take advantage of the opportunities to try different things and figure out what's best for us.
Yes, I also agree with it. Our body tells us what is best for us.
Yeah.
So, Katie, here at Sachi Saheli, we have conceptualized a menstrual kit. And this is the kit. We keep 5 things in it.
Yeah.
And one is the pad,
Yep.
a panty, a paper wrap, and a paper envelope, and a paper soap. So we give these kits to adolescent girls when we go for the workshops in schools. So we are really trying to replace disposable pads with some, sustainable options. So if we keep cloth pads in this kit, what else we should put inside to make it more useful?
Yeah, fantastic. I think that two things. I think a travel pouch, something that they can sort of store and change. And I actually think, I mean, again, I guess your kit is just a sort of taster for them to try these different products. We do pad kits for adolescent girls too, but we find a minimum of 4 products is necessary for a full cycle. But if the idea is to give them a chance to try different things, then I think you can always try with one. We have very simple travel pouches, like it's a leak-proof pouch with a drawstring. So something like that is helpful. But the main thing, of course, with the cloth pad, I think, is the instructions around proper care, because obviously the product is as effective and healthy and safe as the care that it's given. So I always feel these products really require a conversation as well, and an introduction. And to helping, girls understand even what their options are. One thing we do a lot at Eco Femme is product analysis. Even obviously we promote cloth pads, but in fact, we really try to give informed choice first and foremost. And I know that's very much your value base as well. We've got options. Let's think about all of them. Let's look at them all in terms of the ingredients, how we use them, how we get rid of them, who's making them. To have all the information so that when we're deciding on products, we know what we're choosing. We're not just blindly following a practice because someone else told us to do it, but we're really empowered with the accurate information.
Yes. One more last question I wanted to ask. So this is related to the women who have just delivered a baby. So is it a good idea to use the cloth pads just after the delivery?
Yeah, again, I think it is a good idea. I know many women here in Oroville have used cloth pads. Sometimes also, of course, there can be a lot of soreness and a lot of bleeding as well. So, I think, again, the super comfy can often go well as a postpartum pad. Again, it's a very big one with the double buttons. Even is nicely, not moving around too much and just resting. You can even just fold cloth. But again, I personally feel I would always recommend cloth before disposable pads, mostly on account of the chemicals and the plastics in the disposable. I think that they're, and especially after delivery where everything is so open and so sensitive, we don't want to kind of expose the vagina to chemicals. So I do think cloth is ideal actually at that time.
I think
Okay. So
that brings us to the end, Shanaz. I think are we done?
yes, I think. We also have our president with us. I think maybe she also have some words to say, uh, and maybe then we can wrap up. Is she
Sure.
with us, Dr. Subi?
Uh, Hi, after so much, such a long conversation with Kathy, I just can say is thank you so much for so patiently answering our so much questions, so many questions. Thank you so much, Kathy, for being here with us.
It's been my pleasure, and I'm really delighted. I've been following the work of Sachi Sahili for a while now, and I know that you're really, I think, adding great value to the sort of whole menstrual landscape. And really, I'm delighted to actually have this opportunity and to meet you all. And it's been, I think, a great conversation. And it's always exciting to meet other peers in this sector. So thank you for the wonderful work that you're doing as well. I think it's really important and really adding great value.
Thank you so much once again.